In today's topic, it's going to be impossible to answer everybody, but please ask the questions and I promise you I will get back to you. Patrick and I will reach out and answer any questions or any topics you want to see in more depth. We have a nice tight schedule for us today. And so without further ado, we're going to jump into this. I have been privileged to have my career split into two different phases. I've spent half of it in industry, leading large analytic teams, and I've spent the other half in consulting. I work for Protiviti, and it is a absolutely incredible organization. $1.13 billion in revenue, meaning we are no boutique. We serve a large portion of the Fortune 1000, 35% of the Fortune Global 500. We have a robust set of offerings covering technology consulting, and I do want to highlight some of the other ones as well, the business process improvement, which is going to be important later as we discuss the COE, as well as some of the risk and compliance, advanced analytic modules. We have the ability to flexibly staff our projects because we are a fully owned subsidiary of Robert Half, meaning we can do consulting and we can also do staff aug, temp to hire. We can help you fit some of your organizational goals with analytics and beyond through our flexible delivery model and relationship. We are also where you are. Now, I am trying to buzz through these slides rather quickly, so I hope you appreciate the speed that I'm getting through my kind of required background. We have a global presence. You can find us all over the world, 31 different countries, and we have more than 400 offices when you add in our member firms as well. So we are a full gamut service provider. We're also recognized for our people. We have been named one of the best consulting firms to work for numerous times. We have been recognized as a great place to work in a whole host of cities. We have been SAP's Partner of the Year 5 times. So with all of that said, it's time to get to work. The reason I am speaking with you today is shown on this info chart. 79.4% of executives fear disruption from data-driven competitors, and 55%, just under, report that they have an inability to be nimble, and that is one of their largest competitive threats that they face today. We are going to talk in detail, and I am going to provide you some very pragmatic solutions for how you can address and improve that scenario. So before we do that, let's take a look at some just general analytic trends in the market. Currently, self-service is the norm. Everybody expects to have self-service capabilities. Further, technology is dissolving the barriers between the business and analytics. We expect business practitioners now to have a baseline capability of technical skills. And we're starting to even see that more and more in HR, job postings, and expectations for the role. There has been a very large decrease in effort required to conduct analysis, and general experimentation is taking us to a final, solid, well-maintained state a lot quicker than ever before. Now, this brings us to the first poll of the day. I need to know a little bit more about you. What I am interested in is if you are aligned with the IT practice or a technology team. If you are, I want to know if you're within an analytics function. Or are you in a business function? If you are in the business function, is your role specific to analytics? Or do you oversee a general business function or participate in a general business function and are just interested here in some of the new capabilities that are coming with the business object stack? So go ahead and publish that poll. I have what I need. And I see 60%-ish are in a technology team that is related to analytics. Several of you are in technology teams not related to analytics, but we do have a decent business function as well. Now, this is going to change the tone of the presentation just a little bit as I'm going to make some of my examples and use cases more specific to you. So what is an analytics COE and why do we necessarily care? When I speak to clients and when I release some of our polls, and Protiviti will survey a lot of different clients in the industry as part of our knowledge leader information stack. And from those polls, we hear again and again that clients have data warehouses, they have data lakes, they have infrastructure, but their end users aren't adopting these well. They're not going far enough. Self-service is fairly limited. They have siloed, working, strong analytic capabilities, sometimes even advanced analytic capabilities, but nothing that goes cross-departmental as a major initiative. In other words, we have data, but we don't have insight. And we have departmental knowledge, but not the institutional understanding. And more than anything else, people report that their analytic capabilities today show them where we were, but not what's in front of us or what comes next. When I am asked to introduce a business function to analytics, I use this specific slide. And what I tell them is to envision within that single bullet that analytics BI is your data warehouse, your Bob J system, your front-end capabilities, your entire technology stack related to analytics, both back-end and front-end. And that this stack is going to consume data. It's going to be fed from the business processes. And in turn, we're going to get data analysis performed by end users to create an insight, something new, something actionable, something that they can then take to their leadership and change management. That insight is going to be consumed. It's going to result in a change or an adjustment or an optimization of a business problem, a business practice. And that in turn is going to complete the value circle. You are going to see an ROI because you have business action that drove change. And your analytic investments and your analytic components are really one of the major catalysts to bringing this together. Now, when I talk to a lot of analytic teams, everybody is right there in that one single bullet, and we don't look at that broader picture of analytics enough. So when we talk about our analytics operating models and our centers of excellence, we want to think about additional work streams that support the other pieces of this analytic process or analytic wheel. So this is all we really have today. We have our modern data layer, the front end, the back end, but that is only one piece of the equation. And so the fundamental problem has to do with something called data literacy, which is on the lips of quite a number of people as of late. So what I want you to do is visualize a chart starting from the bottom where little value is provided, moving up that axis to high value, and then trend that out over time. Now, if you took that and you took what your SAP analytic technology stack has the potential to provide, you will see that this line keeps going up. As mentioned on that overall trend that we saw before, analytics has become easier. Development has become simpler, faster. We have more visual, more guided tools. But when we look at an organization's ability to truly exploit this technology for value, we realize that they are lagging behind. And this delta is something that SAP likes to refer to as data literacy, and Gartner likes to refer to as digital dexterity. And this chart is really the overwhelming premise of the COE conversation we're having today. It is how do you manipulate and how do you bend these lines to achieve more? So if we go back to the core functions of our analytics center of excellence, we go back to the core overall operating model, the first thing that we can identify is we need something else. We need to run initiatives which intentionally target the end user communities and raise their data literacy. Likewise, we need to start exploring new operating models under a projects division that can achieve more using some of the technology scope. This will be explored in a bit more detail further in the presentation, but I can't tell you how often I have a kind of aha moment when I watch an analytic presentation. Ingo Hilford tends to give them to me quite frequently, And I see something where I said, wow, I didn't realize we could do that. That's pretty cool. I see it quite a bit in SAP Analytics Cloud right now. And that's a technology stack that I truly believe even developers are not using to their full potential. So how do you increase that even within kind of the IT development sphere? And that's really what this projects line is going to focus on. It's going to focus on communication and increasing the development tools that we have. Before we can really get to ways to improve it, we need to explore more of the problems we have today. And I have broken these up into two: the people challenges with analytics, and then the process challenges with analytics coming next. One major thing that we tend to focus on is our training programs. We talk about the knowledge and the how-to, and this is a major limiting factor in people's ability to really use our analytic stack to its full potential. When we think about training, a lot of times we don't have the right approach to it, and this is coming from a lifelong analytics practitioner here. We tend to talk to them about filtering, teaching them our terminology. And when a question comes out that is business focused or an interpretation of data, we sometimes fall short on that as well, because we need the business community to answer some of those questions. And now you're starting to see a little bit of that chicken and the egg scenario, where the initiatives driving data literacy are required to have a high functioning analytic system, because we ultimately need them to be the voice of both requirements and answer knowledge questions related to how to interpret the data. Language and culture exists between IT in an organization, as well as different departments within a larger business. It also exists between separate geographical locations, and it's something that needs to be kind of monitored and investigated, and even approached in a very mindful way. The easy way to describe some of this is some of the approaches that would work for somebody that is on a sales team are not going to be the same analytical needs of somebody in an accounting team. And that language and culture needs to be viewed a little bit more specifically. Now, none of us have enough time, and the collaboration and the number of meetings to accomplish something is a limiting factor. I have never met somebody on an analytics team that turned around and said, like, yeah, the business, I don't like them. Don't really want to make them happy. It's never happened. And likewise, I have never had a business user willfully attempt to either sabotage or not attempt to get the full amount of value that they could out of the analytic tools that we were making available to them. This collaboration time in meetings needs to be monitored mindfully, again, with some of the operating models and approaches that we're going to take. Now, for this next one, I need you to hear a story about my mother. Every Thanksgiving, my mother cuts the right leg off of a Thanksgiving turkey, and she bakes it. And so every year, I miss out on my Hallmark movie moment because the right leg's off the turkey. And so one year I said, Mom, why do you do this? And so she said, well, your grandmother, Grandma Wojcik, was the one that started doing this. So I have always just followed suit. So I said, Grandma Wojcik, why do we cut the right leg off the turkey every Thanksgiving? And she said, well, that's the way my mother has taught me. And so we go to great grandmother Wojcik and we say, hey, why are you cutting this leg off the turkey? And she says, well, you know, back in the Great Depression, my oven was too small. And here we are 100 years later in this fake theoretical scenario story that I'm telling you, exploring why this right leg is cut off. But this is very real. People do not change. And once they find a process, they will tend to follow it unless they are shown a better way, or unless they mindfully step back and look at the process in a lot more detail. And that brings us really to the art of the possible. Without knowing what you can do with your analytic stack and ways that can be approached. And I alluded to it this morning or earlier, that even somebody that is in this world, that is completely invested in analytics, is constantly learning new things and new art of the possible approaches. There are multiple approaches you can take as you go through a requirements gathering or go through a new analytic project, things like a VIA model. that help you to kind of contextually and specifically update parts of your program. So if these are some of the people resistances with analytics, we are going to jump into some of the process challenges that people face as well. The first one is something I like to call analytic overhead. Analytic overhead is experienced when somebody is using the tools, exporting a bunch of data, manipulating it, or otherwise just using the tools and taking a lot of steps to get to the end results that they need to show. Now, a lot of us on the Bob J tool part know about variance, know about saving user versions of it, but you would be surprised when you look at your logs or look over a user's shoulder how often they're actually doing it. This analytic overhead is a major problem, especially when you factor in some of the data velocity. Anytime you see a monthly large analysis and presentation deck go out, think of how stale that information is coming at the end of the month, as opposed to if it came out every week, and how much more actionable it would be if it did not have this analytic overhead or these steps taken to get there. We have another type of burden referred to as an insight burden. Now, an insight burden is experienced when you consume analytics, and this is one of the reasons that adoption tends to fail, or that you require more robust knowledge and training to meet your users' needs. Think about the difference between an infographic and a self-service high functionality dashboard. The dashboard might provide a more versatility in approaching your scenarios, but the infographic conveys its message quicker. And reflect on that with the people problems of time and meetings and attention. And you'll realize that the value statements that an infographic tends to provide. As we keep going forward through this, we're going to start talking more about how Analytics Cloud or some of the new Webby engine tools or some of the new Webby capabilities can really influence this. I don't see enough organizations using their stack to produce infographics to communicate a problem. They tend to focus on those enterprise reporting scenarios. And that is missing a major component of the overall situation that the analytic is showing. I will give you an example of that briefly, but imagine a dashboard where you see a dip in produced quantity within 1 month. You see it on the chart, but you don't know why. You have to turn and ask somebody, hey, why did the volume drop? Well, the power got turned off that month, or we were retrofitting a line. Your typical enterprise dashboards don't contain the full story. And so an insight burden is still very possible to experience even with those types of tools. Lastly, strategic alignment tends to be a problem. I cannot tell you how often I am frustrated with a discussion on ROI of your analytic systems. The analytic systems function kind of like a roadway, right? If a road between point A and point B didn't exist, then there would be no traffic between the pair of them. There would be no gas stations, there would be no stores and hotels and ancillary businesses that use that roadway and connect the points together. And when you think about it, even in a bigger situation, your manufacturing value statement might not exist, right? And the road is really the catalyst that produced through it, but you miss the ROI because what's the ROI of a road? It's nothing. And so it gets you to the point of understanding action and events and how your analytic systems experience those and help them along their path. That really helps you to make a proactive ROI and not just the cost-cutting scenarios. So when we take a look back at our analytic work streams, we want to talk about the initiatives now in more detail. And this is a broad range of supporting services that focus on assisting, assessing, that being a big one, collaborating, training, explaining, streamlining, and celebrating the end user communities. Celebrating is important. That is a way to get towards analytic ROI and articulate your value statement to an executive level. Now, when we look at the value curve we saw before, what I can tell you is that the initiatives are going to bend the curve upward of an organization's ability to exploit the technology for value. And that is how this is going to really approach and update your data literacy. Now, data literacy in general is something that I recommend you do a baseline assessment on. That is a service we offer to baseline the capabilities of your organization and to make plans that are intentional and mindful with our efforts to kind of raise their core capabilities. I am going to allow you to select our next topic. And so this is the moment I would like to launch poll number 2. My goal here is really to find out what this audience wants to hear a bit more about. And I believe you can select multiple of these within it.
Thank you very much, Eric.
So
Eric, I see a lot of people are voting right now. We got a couple hundred people in the session. That's really great. And people are still voting. I see like 40% of people are voting, and it's going to be hard to determine some trends based on the results I see right now. So,
all right. Well, you know what? We are pretty even across the board on my side. So based on your answer to number 1, I think we are going to hit user management in a lot more detail. This is a valuable lesson I think that we all learned right now, is that, you know, sometimes you really don't have a choice at all. It's just the illusion of one. So let's hit some of the user management and training and power user in a little bit more detail. So let me jump to that slide.
So by the way, 35% voted around intake process and development, 23% voted around user management, 49% voted around end user training or support, 55% around data lineage metric management, and 33% around communication strategy. So as you can see, by the way, is people could select multiple answers.
Very cool. So I do have a lot of content, and Protiviti has a lot of content and collateral on this subject. So this is going to be some action items and maybe some Q&A towards the end that we will hit some of these topics in more detail. I mentioned it at the beginning, but we would really love to collaborate and discuss with you about your analytics COE and about your analytics systems in more detail. So I look forward to talking with you. When we talk about user management, power user strategy, we start with writing it down and then cleaning it up. Start from an org structure and capture your overall desired alignment. I mentioned it before, but the way you approach a sales team is going to be wildly different than the way that you approach a finance team. And the needs and power user structures are going to be different as well. So if you think about a typical sales organization, they are going to want to have a small analyst community that is focused on specifically answering questions for the field. And they are going to want mobile optimized dashboards and analytics deployed out to their field so that they can consume the content in as lightweight a method as possible when it's useful to them at an immediate stance. So those differences you will see in an even bigger way between a corporate function and some of the business lines under them. It is rare to see some of the self-service capabilities at a plant line versus a corporate function, right? They vary quite differently, and there's definitely a higher level of control to the standardization of the measures and metrics and management strategy between them. So the acronym SOAP is for clean it up. When you look at your user community, the first thing you can do is sense them. Everybody knows the go-to person within an organization. They know the people that can answer the questions, the wizard, right? The person on the ground that can you can ask a free-form question and he can go or she can go and look it up and give you an answer. The amazing thing about this user community is the logs, the observation of what we can see them doing in the system doesn't always agree with what their behavior is. And so taking somebody that is already sensed to be a high data literacy potential person and observing them can help you identify how that you can clean up some of their process and insight burden challenges. Can you streamline that analytic overhead to accomplish their goals faster? At some level, you have to move beyond the individual and you need to begin assessing. In my past, we had a very robust power user training system. And when you look at your BobJ 4.3, or let's talk specifically on SAP Analytics Cloud, when you look at Analytics Cloud, you realize that there are features within that product that aren't for everybody, that are for very specific use cases of analytics. So it goes beyond just enterprise reporting, which it does really well, into a value driver tree to allow you to collaborate and scale. It allows you to do something like smart discovery and jump to insights and jump to discovery of your data in a faster way. Assessing allows you to make the pivot from individuals that are good at this, streamlining their behavior through the observe phase, to growing them within an organization. And that gets back to the org structure question as well. Because if you assess people within an org structure, you have the goals from the executive leadership that say, I am looking for X number of people that can satisfy and accomplish this business function or accomplish these analytical needs. And your assessment allows you to map directly off of that and build the program to some of their goals. Now, the final point is the most important, and this is really promoting and celebrating. And this gets back to that analytic ROI conversation I mentioned before. Actions are what generate ROI. Actions are what really drive value towards our analytic assets. And promoting them and having a channel to celebrate when they've accomplished something, as well as to show others, raises the bar for everybody else. So let's talk about projects. Projects are likely not what you suspect it is. A lot of people believe projects are the typical development flow that we go through, but in this context, it is not intended to be. The first thing the projects function does is rapidly mature existing current state analytics, and they do it through really innovative methods. This group will also be the one to quarterback a challenge that you might be experiencing. So for example, COVID-19 is on everybody's lips. And the supply chain impacts that that situation has created, or the supply chain really challenges that we're starting to see, is a perfect example of a group that can quarterback and accomplish. Further, this group is also responsible for some of the communication and structure of it. So this is also targeting the same exact line that we saw before, the ability of an organization to exploit technology for value, but this time it delivers that in a much more aggressive way, using a hybrid techno-functional type of analyst team. So the first bullet, the initiatives, is about raising more strongly capable analytic users. The projects function is about unleashing them in a controlled, repeatable, scalable way to let them achieve. Now, it's important to note that you can really get capped. You can hit a ceiling if your modern data layer is not keeping up with you. And that is something that we do see quite a bit, that while in the industry it's faster to develop than ever before, it takes less time to develop. You can do agile because you have in-memory technologies and unstructured environments. We're not all using those at their full capability. And so this takes us into a bit of a bimodal type of discussion, where we need to start approaching a team with a different risk appetite as the one that we look at with the modern data layer. So imagine a different approach. Imagine that techno-functional user group of highly capable end users that are using modern management techniques, a bimodal strategy, which gives them an appetite for risk. Agile, being iterative, to change, to iterate, to quickly narrow down requirements that aren't fully understood, and to really take advantage of the data visualization and storytelling scenarios that we have in front of us. Now, give that team more. Give them access to Analytics Cloud. Give them intelligent RPA technologies. Give them access to in-memory processing or HANA technologies. The storytelling abilities that Gregory mentioned in session 1 related to the Analytics Cloud connector to Webby is a perfect example of that. That person could go out using that type of connector, make something that's more akin to an infographic to explain the situation, the scenario, and quickly baseline people's understanding of a department, of a scenario, of the challenges that we face. Focusing on that attention, that meetings, right? Reducing some of those challenges that we face. So really focusing it on those analytic people and challenges in a strong effort to serve the organization. They use clever things, right? The first thing they tend to use is automation tools in a big way. Intelligent RPA can function like a quick and dirty ETL process. And an unstructured environment gives you full flexibility to mature out your modeling scenarios and persistent. These make requirements better for the modern data layer. Likewise, this is where you can introduce your advanced analytic use cases, your data science, right? Frequently, we struggle to push data science and advanced analytic use cases because the baseline capabilities of the data literacy capabilities of the organization aren't fully invested yet in using regressions or using some of the harder statistical models that require more explanation. It's not necessarily intuitive, and it requires kind of a more aggressive approach to incorporate it. I mentioned the DevOps. This is a group that runs fast, that has a bias for accomplishment, and that has a deeper risk posture. Now, that doesn't mean, all rules are off. It's a risk posture intended to iterate and advance the capabilities while maintaining the overall system health, while maintaining the scalability, the reliability, the one version of the truth. It is a forked approach. It is a different posture. And I think now you can kind of sense why this is a different development scenario and why you can get capped by your modern data layer. This is part of the reason those upgrades are important, and to always be exploring some of the new tools and technologies that are available to you. Intelligent RPA is one of my favorite tools. And until I really got my hands dirty on it, I didn't realize how applicable it was for analytics, that you can be pragmatic. Storytelling is crucial for this group. I mentioned before the importance of maximizing people's attention, limiting the number of meetings, communicating succinctly. The goal of analytics is to give people insight, to give them the information they need to make a great decision that will have business outcomes. Storytelling is a way to do it, as are your infographics and presentations. It is important to baseline people towards the understanding of what each department, each function is experiencing, how they're doing, challenges. That level of transparency can truly be accomplished with a projects group that not just matures it, but also explains it to people. The modern data layer is the core. This is the crux of the entire enterprise. And so it should become obvious, but the initiatives and the projects influence the modern data layer in a major, major way. Number one, it should be providing greater requirements, more transparency through the agile, iterative, projects-based approach with a greater risk posture and the initiatives, because let's be honest, right? If you're going to build a house, you're going to go ask for an architect. You're not going to let a 7-year-old do it. The initiatives bring up people's capabilities. It brings up their experience. It brings up their capabilities. And in turn, you get better advice that is more actionable in the modern data layer. So let me ask you, does your organization use any of these modern analytical management or project techniques today?
That's a pretty simple question. We're seeing people answering very quickly. We've got 25% of voters so far, still going up. And there we see a clear trend. And the numbers are really 100% this time, so you can't multi-select.
So the vast majority of you are falling into somewhat, with close to 30% saying yes and greater than 20% saying no.
And Eric, we've got another 8-9 minutes for the session. So
absolutely. The final topic is going to be on your modern data layer. The collective front end and back end of your capabilities. It is your technical capabilities and the foundational data populations. It must be stable, reliant, and compliant. It must provide you with both stability, performance, as well as privacy, GDPR, security, SOX compliance, and your incident management scenarios. So the way this influences the line is by raising the potential analytical stack that your platform has the ability to provide. And this is really something to consider, especially if you find yourself unable to really unleash the project's function that you have outside. My final poll of the day is, do you view your modern data layer as a limiting constraint on your technical constraint? I love the answers I'm seeing so far. Right now, we are very close to 50-50.
Yep.
Love it.
And by the way, while people are answering the poll, just make sure that you put your comments on LinkedIn or Twitter at hashtag BobJLive, please. That would be nice. Thanks.
Thank you. So we are going to wrap this up with a final update on what ANALYTIC COE does. Your analytics COE is going to measure and generate that ROI. And they're going to do it because they understand the people, process, and technology inefficiencies, and they are going to target to reduce them. It bends the curve. It challenges the status quo, leans forward. It represents your location to implement advanced analytic use cases and to ramp up your institutional understanding. We have a tendency to look at logs as seeing high usage of some of our systems does not necessarily represent a positive scenario. There is an anti-pattern that exists from high usage, but reducing analytic overhead is the goal. Take away the burden, capture the action, the ROI, and improve the IT developments to just streamline, and then communicate up and down the value chain so that it is better understood for all. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to answering a lot of your questions and responding to your emails